What if the way you view your own intelligence is basically the single biggest predictor of how you handle failure?
Right, and even crazier, what if the very praise you give to encourage someone is actually, setting them up to fail entirely?
Yeah, that is such a wild concept. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. We are so thrilled to have you with us today
We really are.
because we know you're the kind of person who wants to get straight to the core of a topic, right?
Hmm.
No fluff, just the good stuff. So today we are diving into the architectural blueprint of human potential, which is Carol Dweck's groundbreaking theory of mindset.
And we have a super fascinating stack of sources to unpack for you today. We're pulling from detailed summaries of Dweck's original book, Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, but we aren't stopping there.
No, we definitely aren't.
Right. We are pairing that with real-world applications. So we've got an exploratory case study on a collegiate baseball team from Taylor University, some really interesting empirical research on parental praise out of Thailand, and even corporate training guides.
Which is a huge spread of data.
It is. And crucially, we are also diving into recent, highly critical scientific studies that, well, they really question whether Dweck's theory actually holds up when you deploy it in the messy real world.
Exactly. Our mission today is to separate the pop psychology buzzwords from the actual mechanistic science. We're going to explain the core ideas of fixed versus growth mindsets, see how they play out in high-stakes arenas, and critically examine the massive scientific pushback.
Because there is a lot of pushback.
Oh, tons.
Yeah.
But to really understand this, we have to start at the foundation.
Yeah.
So how did this entire theory even begin?
Yeah, so it began with this deceptively simple experiment Dweck conducted with 10-year-old children. She brought these kids into a psychology lab and just gave them a series of puzzles to solve.
Sounds pretty standard so far.
Right, and at first the puzzles were super easy, but they progressively grew much, much tougher. And humanity essentially split into two distinct camps right there in the lab.
Like a clear divide.
A total divide. When the puzzles got difficult, one group of children relished the challenge. They leaned in, but the other group immediately backed away and just gave up.
And they didn't just give up, right?
Mhm.
I mean, the sources note they actually felt threatened by the puzzle.
Yeah, they felt genuinely threatened.
Which seems crazy until you realize what Dweck uncovered. She realized that people differ profoundly based on their underlying belief system about their own ability.
Exactly. She categorized these into two mental architectures. The first is the fixed mindset, which researchers sometimes call entity theory.
Entity theory.
Right. And they call it that because you view your intelligence or your talent as a singular, unchangeable entity. You believe you're born with a set amount of brains, and your traits are carved in stone.
The psychological implications of carrying that belief around are just staggering. Because if you believe your abilities are permanently fixed, then every single task you undertake isn't just a task.
No, it becomes a definitive test of your innate worth.
Exactly. You're constantly on trial. But I think the most insidious mechanism of a fixed mindset is how it redefines effort. Like, the underlying logic tells you that if you were a natural genius, you wouldn't have to try so hard.
Yeah, so having to put in effort is actually a sign of deficiency. If you have to study, you must not be smart.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. Is a fixed mindset basically like playing a video game on permadeath mode,
Oh, I like that.
where, one single mistake ruins your whole identity, deletes your save file, and ends the game completely? Because if you fail, you don't just say, oh, I failed at this puzzle. You internalize it as, I am a failure.
Yeah, it becomes your identity.
Right. Whereas a growth mindset is treating life like a sandbox mode. When you lose, you don't lose your identity. You just respawn, analyze the boss's attack pattern, and try a completely new strategy.
That analogy frames the psychological stakes perfectly. In that sandbox mode, which researchers call incremental theory, by the way.
Incremental theory, got it.
Meaning the belief that abilities grow in increments through effort and learning. So in that mode, failure still stings. It hurts. We're not saying it doesn't.
Sure, nobody likes losing.
Exactly. But it is stripped of its identity-destroying power. It becomes just a stepping stone and a signal to adapt. Take the classic example of getting accepted into an elite institution, like Harvard or Juilliard.
Oh, this is a great example.
Right. A student with a fixed mindset views that acceptance letter as the final validation. They arrive on day one trying to hide their weaknesses, terrified of looking dumb, because they just want to prove they belong.
Because the test is over for them.
Exactly. While the growth mindset student arrives on day one looking for the hardest professor to critique them.
Because the acceptance wasn't the finish line. It was just a ticket to get access to the best feedback in the world.
Yes, precisely. But we have to ask, how does this sandbox mentality hold up when the stakes aren't just a college acceptance or a 10-year-old's puzzle, but like a high-pressure, real-world arena?
Right, because theory is nice, but practice is messy.
So messy. But if we look at the highest levels of sports, the psychological mechanics become painfully visible.
John McEnroe and Pete Sampras are the perfect case study here from the sources. I mean, McEnroe had supreme natural talent, arguably some of the best in tennis history.
Oh, absolutely.
But he was completely crippled by a classic fixed mindset. He couldn't handle setbacks because any failure threatened his identity as a quote-unquote natural. He famously blamed a massive loss at the 1984 French Open on, get this, the noise coming from a cameraman's headset.
I mean, that deflection is just a classic fixed mindset defense mechanism.
Right.
Because his intelligence and talent were supposedly carved in stone, his brain literally could not process the idea that he needed to improve his own strategy. He had to invent an external scapegoat.
He had to protect the ego at all costs.
Exactly. Now contrast that with Pete Sampras, who completely embodied the growth mindset. At Wimbledon in 2000, Sampras was facing a major deficit. He was down a set and down 4-1 in a tiebreaker.
A super stressful situation.
Insanely stressful. But instead of throwing a tantrum or crumbling, he treated it like a data problem. He searched his past experiences for a frame of reference, asked himself what strategies had worked before, and adjusted his mechanics.
Wow.
He viewed the deficit as a problem to be solved, not an indictment of his talent. And, well, he went on to win his 13th Grand Slam.
I love the Muhammad Ali example from the sources, too. Physically, Ali didn't have the classic natural measurements for a heavyweight boxer. When he fought Sonny Liston, Liston was the natural powerhouse.
Yeah, Liston was terrifying.
He was. But Ali's brilliance was in his sandbox mentality. He studied Liston's psychology, his fighting style, and he literally outthought him. He used learning and strategy to overcome a stark physical disadvantage.
It's all about the learning orientation.
Exactly. And we see this exact same dynamic translate perfectly into the corporate world, too.
We really do, and the financial consequences are just immense. Consider the contrast between Lou Gerstner at IBM and Jeff Skilling at Enron.
Oh, Enron, the classic disaster.
Total disaster. But let's start with IBM. When Lou Gerstner took over IBM in the 1990s, the company was kind of choking on its own elitism. It had this massive fixed mindset culture where executives were fighting turf wars just to prove they were the smartest people in the room.
So no one was collaborating.
Nobody. Nobody shared information because helping someone else might make you look less exceptional. But Gerstner deliberately destroyed that hierarchy. He changed the incentive structure to reward overall team performance and cross-departmental execution, basically dragging the entire culture toward a growth mindset.
Which saved the company.
Yeah.
And then you look at Jeff Skilling at Enron, and it is a masterclass in how a fixed mindset creates a fear of looking stupid, which leads directly to massive fraud.
Yep.
Skilling was undeniably brilliant, but his mindset demanded that he always be the undisputed genius. He created a culture of extreme groupthink. Because he believed his innate talent made his ideas flawless, he just assumed anyone disagreeing with him was unintelligent.
And that is the fatal flaw of the fixed mindset in leadership. If you believe intelligence is static, admitting you don't know something isn't just a gap in your knowledge.
It's a permanent flaw.
Exactly. So Skilling surrounded himself with yes men. When the financial numbers started looking bad, his mindset just couldn't process the failure. To admit the business model was failing would mean admitting he wasn't a genius.
So they covered it up.
They covered it up. The inability to process negative feedback literally destroyed a multi-billion-dollar company.
It makes you wonder about your own workplace, doesn't it? I mean, for you listening right now, are you in a culture where asking a question makes you look incompetent or one where it's rewarded? Because as we saw with Enron, that difference is worth billions.
And it doesn't stop at work. It even bleeds into romantic relationships.
Oh, right. The relationship aspect is fascinating.
The sources point out that in love, a fixed mindset views relationship problems as permanent character flaws. If they get rejected, they feel personally and permanently damaged, which often triggers a demand for revenge.
That's so toxic.
It is. But a growth mindset views the relationship and the partner and the self as things that require continuous development and communication.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it forces us to confront a really uncomfortable truth about our culture. Despite all this evidence showing that a growth mindset is demonstrably better in sports, business, and love, our society still totally idolizes the quote-unquote natural.
Oh, 100%. We are obsessed with the myth of the effortless genius, the person who just wakes up brilliant without having to try.
We absolutely do. We love the highlight reel, but we hate the practice footage. We culturally worship the natural. So if we want to break that cycle for ourselves or for the people we manage or for our kids, how do we actually do it?
Well, the sources say it actually starts with how we talk to each other,
Yeah.
particularly how we give praise.
Right.
But there is a massive trap here that most people fall right into. The science on this is incredibly specific.
Let's get into the Thailand study then.
Yes. There is this really illuminating empirical study from Thailand that looked at 150 students and their parents, and it empirically proved that the exact words you use to praise someone can rewire their entire mental architecture.
Just the specific words.
Just the words. The researchers divided praise into two distinct categories: person praise and process praise.
So person praise is saying something like, you got an A. You are so smart. Or, you won the game. You're a natural.
Precisely. And the data showed that person praise directly correlates with developing a fixed mindset.
Wait, really? Because that sounds like such a nice thing to say.
It does, but it's dangerous. When you tell a child or an employee they are quote-unquote smart because they succeeded at a task, you inadvertently make them terrified of future challenges.
Oh, because they have to protect the label.
Exactly. Their internal logic dictates, well, if I try something harder and fail, I won't be smart anymore. So to protect that fragile label you just handed them, they stop taking risks. They stop growing.
The compliment actually paralyzes them. You think you are building their confidence, but you are actually building a cage.
That is a perfect way to put it. But process praise, which is saying things like, you worked really hard on that strategy, or I love how you analyzed your mistakes and didn't give up on that math problem.
So praising the effort.
Yes, praising the effort. That correlates strongly with a growth mindset. It teaches the recipient that their underlying value comes from their resilience and their willingness to learn, not their genetic luck.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because as Dweck's theory became a global phenomenon over the last 2 decades, it kind of became trendy. And when things get trendy, people start faking it.
Oh, the false growth mindset.
Yes, there is this documented phenomenon called the false growth mindset. Dweck observed it herself, and researcher Michael Barger and his colleagues actually measured it. They discovered that a massive 25% of teachers and 15% of adults operate with a false growth mindset.
The methodology researchers used to uncover this is just brilliant, by the way.
How did they do it?
Well, they didn't just give people a survey asking, do you believe abilities can change? Because
Sure.
everyone knows that's the socially acceptable answer now. You'd just lie.
Right, everyone knows what they're supposed to say.
Exactly. So instead, they ran what are called cluster analyses. Basically, instead of taking people's words at face value, they grouped together their hidden underlying behaviors, like how they actually reacted to student failure, how they assigned grades, how they spoke in private.
To see what they genuinely believe deep down.
Right. And they found that these adults superficially parrot growth mindset buzzwords, but their behavior completely contradicts the theory. Deep down, they still praise intelligence over effort.
It's like downloading a language learning app, carrying your phone around all day and telling everyone you speak French, but you've never actually opened the app to practice.
Yes.
You have the identity, you have the vocabulary, but you want it all without the actual friction of learning.
That captures the hypocrisy perfectly. People desperately want the comfort and the progressive label of having a growth mindset, but they refuse to engage in the healthy discomfort of actual failure.
Because let's be honest, true growth requires failing, and failing is painful. Nobody likes it.
Exactly.
So if the false mindset is all talk, what does doing the sweating actually look like in the real world? We see a perfect example of this in the collegiate baseball case study at Taylor University.
Oh, I love this case study.
The coach there doesn't just put a motivational poster on the wall. He actively weaponizes failure as a training tool.
It really is one of the most brilliant real-world applications of the theory. The coach operates on a philosophy of getting 1% better every day. But to achieve that neurological adaptation, he uses pitching machines set to near impossible speeds and trajectories.
Just brutal settings.
Yeah, he essentially guarantees that his players will fail repeatedly during batting practice.
Which is saying something, because in baseball, a 70% failure rate in hitting is actually considered elite. I mean, if you fail 7 out of 10 times at the plate for your whole career, you go to the Hall of Fame.
Right. So the coach takes that baseline of failure and amplifies it to force a psychological shift. He teaches his athletes a specific mechanistic technique, which is, quote, slow down and breathe.
Slow down and breathe.
Yes. When they miss a pitch, they are trained not to throw their bat in anger, which is what a fixed mindset ego demands. They pause, analyze the biomechanics of their swing, process the immediate physical feedback, and try again. They learn to view failure strictly as actionable data.
That is an incredible system for an individual team with a dedicated coach. But what happens when we try to scale that Taylor University coaching to an entire public school system, or like a massive multinational corporation?
And that is the million-dollar question.
Because we have to look at the other side of the coin today. This is where the science gets incredibly messy and where the massive pushback against Dweck's theory begins.
It is absolutely vital that we look at this objectively. As the source material from Mad Math details, the field of psychology has been going through a massive replication crisis.
Yeah, it's been rocking the whole field for years now.
It has. Over the past decade, many landmark findings simply do not hold up when independent scientists try to repeat the experiments. And Dweck's growth mindset interventions are currently sitting right in the crosshairs of this crisis.
The numbers from the pushback are honestly staggering. Multiple large-scale, highly funded, rigorous studies have completely failed to replicate Dweck's claims that teaching a growth mindset magically improves academic performance.
The specifics really paint a troubling picture for the mass-market version of this theory. For example, a rigorous study in China involving 624 students found absolutely no effect on resilience to failure after a growth mindset intervention.
That's a all.
Zero. Then, a massive study in the UK involving over 4,500 students found that the difference in test scores between the kids who received the mindset training and the control group was, again, exactly zero.
And there was a U.S. study, right, of over 2,600 college students that showed no long-term measurable academic outcomes whatsoever. It gets even broader than that, too.
Right, the meta-analysis.
Yeah, a meta-analysis by researcher Timothy Sisk and his colleagues looked at 273 different studies covering over 365,000 students.
That's a huge sample size.
Massive.
Whoa.
And their ultimate conclusion was that mindset interventions have very weak or entirely null effects on academic achievement.
And we really have to ask why they failed. The criticism from the broader scientific community is sharp and illuminating. Data detective Nick Brown pointed out a massive logical flaw in how the original researchers defend their work.
Well, this quote is so good.
It really is. When these replication studies fail, the original authors often claim that the new scientists just didn't recreate the subtle, strictly controlled laboratory conditions required for the intervention to take root.
Which prompted Nick Brown's devastating response. He said, and I quote, "If your psychological effect is so fragile that it can only be reproduced under strictly controlled laboratory conditions, then why on earth do you think it can be reproduced by an overworked school teacher in a chaotic sixth-grade classroom?"
I mean, it completely dismantles the entire premise of mass interventions. And psychologist Russell Warren took it a step further. After reviewing the literature, he sharply noted that growth mindset interventions only ever seem to consistently improve academic performance if Carol Dweck herself or her direct team is the one running the intervention.
Which obviously doesn't scale.
No, not at all. You cannot put a 45-minute computer module in front of a student and expect it to override 15 years of societal programming and parental feedback. A brief, industrialized intervention cannot dismantle an entire psychological framework.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener? If the hard science shows that these school-wide, corporate-wide interventions are failing, does that mean the whole theory is garbage? Does it mean the fixed and growth mindsets aren't real?
This raises an important question, and it is the crux of the entire debate. The data strongly suggests that institutional quick fixes, making employees sit through a one-hour seminar or handing out pamphlets, completely fail.
Right.
You cannot industrialize a profound mindset shift. However, the failure of a bureaucratic intervention does not invalidate the underlying psychological principle for the individual.
Okay, that's an important distinction.
It's vital. The personal, daily pursuit of learning from failure, of analyzing your mistakes, like the baseball players at Taylor University, remains highly valid and deeply effective.
It just means it's not a magical one-time cure. You can't just take a growth mindset pill and suddenly become Pete Sampras. The failure of the mass interventions might actually be the greatest proof of the theory itself. True growth is incredibly difficult, and it resists shortcuts.
Exactly. Let's bring all of this together. We've journeyed from puzzles with 10-year-olds to the catastrophic groupthink at Enron, and through the rigorous realities of the scientific replication crisis.
It's been quite a ride.
For anyone navigating their own challenges, the takeaways are really clear. First, a true growth mindset is a fundamental rewiring of how you process reality. It means moving your identity away from the outcome.
You transition from the fixed, permadeath identity of I am a failure to the objective sandbox action of I failed, so what is the strategy to fix it?
Second, it requires extreme vigilance in how we interact with others. We have to avoid the praise trap. Praise the process, the effort, and the strategy. Do not praise innate talent, or you risk locking the people you manage or love into a paralyzing fear of failure.
And third, we must beware of the false mindset trap. You cannot just adopt the vocabulary of growth. You have to actually embrace the healthy discomfort of failing. Realizing that true mastery requires immense continuous effort is the only way to achieve it. Just as we saw with champions who outthought and outworked their physical limitations.
It really all comes down to doing the work.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over as you go about your day. If a true growth mindset requires genuine, sometimes painful effort to actually work, and the scientific replication crisis proves that quick institutional interventions completely fail, maybe the real lesson here is that there are absolutely zero shortcuts to mastery, not even psychological ones.
It is a profound paradox.
Think about it. Is the very act of trying to hack your mindset with a quick pop psychology trick actually a symptom of a fixed mindset? We want the easy fix because we don't want to experience the friction of the grueling work. True growth isn't a hack you can install in an afternoon. It's a lifelong commitment to the struggle. And until we embrace the reality of that struggle, our view of human potential will always remain incomplete.